Rain washed the blood down the Bronx gutters, but it couldn't drown out the sound of her muffled screams. The ruthless boss of the Rossi syndicate stepped into the alley to halt a pathetic beating, only to freeze. The pregnant beggar bleeding on the asphalt was the ghost he buried. The Bronx was weeping that night, a relentless, freezing October downpour that turned the neon reflections of Arthur Avenue into blurred streaks of crimson and gold. Vincent Rossi, the undisputed capo of the New York underworld, stood under the awning of Café Belmont. He was a man carved from marble and violence, wearing a bespoke charcoal suit that cost more than the average neighborhood resident made in a year. Beside him stood his underboss, Dominic, shielding Vincent with a black umbrella. They had just concluded a tense sit-down with the remaining capos of the old regime. Vincent's mind was occupied with numbers, territories, and the ever-present threat of the Vitiello family, a rival faction pushing heavily into his southern docks. He inhaled the sharp scent of wet asphalt and espresso, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt, ready to step into his idling armored escalade. Then he heard it. It was a sharp, guttural thud, followed by a breathless gasp. The sound emanated from the narrow, pitch-black alleyway, wedged between a closed bakery and a derelict laundromat across the street. Vincent paused. In his line of work, ignoring the sounds of the street kept you alive. But there was another sound, the unmistakable cruel laughter of men who enjoyed their work a little too much. "Carmine said to make it hurt, right? Kick her again. Let's see if the street trash pops," a voice sneered. Vincent's jaw tightened. He recognized that voice. It was Joey Galliano, a low-level enforcer for the Vitiello family, known for his utter lack of a moral compass. Vincent wasn't a saint. He had blood on his hands more than he cared to count. But the Rossi family had a strict code. Women and children were off limits. To hear a Vitiello thug brazenly torturing a woman on Rossi territory was an insult he couldn't let slide. "Boss let the street soldiers handle it," Dominic muttered, reading the dangerous shift in Vincent's posture. "Stay here." Vincent ordered his voice, a low, gravelly baritone that brooked no argument. He crossed the street, the rain plastering his dark hair to his forehead. As he slipped into the shadows of the alleyway, the scene laid out before him made his blood run cold. Joey Gagliano and another Vitiello, heavy a hulking brute named Frankie, were cornering a homeless woman against the brick wall. She was huddled in a pile of soaked cardboard and trash, wearing a filthy, oversized military surplus jacket. Her hands were desperately wrapped around her swollen, pregnant belly, trying to shield her unborn child from the vicious kicks Frankie was delivering to her ribs and legs. "Please," she sobbed, her voice a cracked, hoarse whisper. "Please the baby. I don't have anything." "You have a message to deliver, bitch." Joey laughed, drawing back his steel-toed boot. "When you get to hell, tell 'em the Vitiellos run this borough." Joey's foot never connected. Vincent moved with the predatory grace of a stalking wolf. He grabbed Joey by the back of his soaked leather jacket, yanking him backward with such immense force that the thug's feet left the ground. Before Joey could even register the attack, Vincent drove a devastating punch into his throat. The cartilage crunched sickeningly. Joey collapsed to the wet pavement, gagging and clawing at his neck. Frankie spun around, reaching for the Glock tucked into his waistband, but he was too slow. Vincent stepped into his guard, trapping Frankie's arm against his body, and delivered a brutal knee to the man's floating ribs. As Frankie doubled over in agony, Vincent grabbed the back of his head and slammed his face into the rough brick wall. Frankie dropped like a stone, leaving the alley in sudden, breathless silence, save for the patter of the rain and the erratic, terrified panting of the woman on the ground. Vincent wiped a speck of blood from his knuckles, barely breathing heavily. "Get up!" he growled to the unconscious men, though he knew they wouldn't. He kicked Joey's fallen gun down a storm drain. Then he turned his attention to the beggar. She was curled into a tight defensive ball, shaking violently. Her matted rain-soaked hair obscured her face, and her clothes reeked of stale alley water and copper. Vincent knelt the knee of his expensive suit, soaking up the muddy puddle. The legendary Mafia boss felt an unexpected pang of pity. "It's over. They won't touch you again," Vincent said, softening his usually abrasive tone. He reached out a large, scarred hand to help her up. "Let me see how badly you're hurt." The woman flinched violently at his touch. She scrambled backward, her hands still instinctively guarding her heavy belly. As she moved, the street lamp at the edge of the alley cast a flickering amber beam across her face. Vincent's heart stopped. The air in his lungs vanished. The world around him, the rain, the unconscious men, the distant sirens faded into a dull, echoing void. He fell to both knees, uncaring of the filth staring at the face beneath the grime, the hollowed cheekbones, the distinctive delicate curve of her jawline, the vivid, striking emerald eyes that were currently wide with stark, unadulterated terror. Ilara. He whispered the name, tearing from his throat like broken glass. It was impossible. Ilara Bennett, the brilliant junior paralegal at the prestigious Harrison and Reed law firm in Manhattan. The only woman who had ever seen past the monster he was and loved the man underneath. The woman who had been tragically killed 7 months ago in a devastating car bombing on the FDR Drive, a hit orchestrated by Carmine Vitiello that had left nothing but charred wreckage and dental records. Vincent had buried her empty casket. He had burned down 3 Vitiello warehouses in his grief. Yet here she was, alive, destitute, and heavily pregnant. Ilara recognized him. A fresh wave of absolute panic washed over her face. Instead of relief, she scrambled backward against the brick wall, her eyes darting frantically for an escape. "No, no, please, Vincent. Don't. Please don't." "Ilara, it's me," he urged, reaching for her trembling shoulders, completely disregarding the mud and blood coating her jacket. "You're alive. How are you?" His gaze dropped to the undeniable swell of her stomach. 7 months. She had died 7 months ago. The math hit him with the force of a freight train. Before he could process the overwhelming realization, Ilara's eyes rolled back. The trauma, the cold, and the brutal beating took their toll. She went limp, collapsing into the garbage. "Dominic!" Vincent roared a sound of pure, unhinged desperation that echoed down Arthur Avenue. He scooped Ilara's fragile, freezing body into his arms, holding her tightly against his chest. "Get the car, call Dr. Aris now." The tires of the armored Escalade shrieked as it tore through the wet streets of Yonkers, ignoring every red light in its path. In the cavernous back seat, Vincent sat rigid, holding Ilara across his lap. He had stripped off her soaked, foul-smelling jacket and wrapped her in his dry suit coat, turning the heat in the cabin to its maximum. Her skin was terrifyingly pale, icy to the touch, and marred by fresh, dark bruises forming along her jawline and cheek. Vincent pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was there, but it was weak and fluttering like a trapped bird. "Drive faster! Dominic!" Vincent snapped his eyes, locked on Ilara's bruised face. "I'm pushing 90, boss," Dominic replied from the driver's seat, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. "Dr. Aris is prepping the underground clinic. What the hell happened back there? Who is she?" "Nobody you need to worry about." Vincent lied smoothly, his instincts kicking in. If Carmine Vitiello's men were kicking her in an alley, they likely didn't know who she was. Joey Galliano had just been extorting a vulnerable street beggar for fun, completely unaware that he was brutalizing the former fiancé of the Rossi family boss. If the Vitiellos knew Ilara was alive, they wouldn't have sent low-level street soldiers. They would have sent a specialized hit squad. And more importantly, why had Ilara reacted with pure terror when she saw him? 20 minutes later, the SUV slammed into the private subterranean garage of a nondescript office building. Dr. Thomas Aris, a disgraced trauma surgeon, who now exclusively patched up gunshot wounds and stitched up mobsters for the Rossi family, was waiting with a gurney and 2 tight-lipped nurses. "Gunshot, doctor?" Aris asked briskly, as Vincent carried Ilara out of the SUV and laid her gently on the sterile white sheets. "Blunt force trauma, ribs, legs, and she's freezing," Vincent commanded, hovering over the gurney as they wheeled her into the trauma bay. "She's roughly 7 months pregnant, Thomas. If you lose her, or if you lose that baby, I will burn this entire building down with you inside it." Dr. Aris swallowed hard, nodding rapidly. "Understood, Mr. Rossi. You need to step outside." For the next 3 hours, Vincent paced the length of the sterile concrete hallway like a caged panther. He smoked half a pack of cigarettes, ignoring the no-smoking signs. His mind was a chaotic storm of memories. He remembered the smell of her vanilla perfume, the way she used to laugh at his archaic, overprotective habits. He remembered the night of the explosion, the agonizing heat of the flames, the soul-crushing emptiness that had haunted his every waking moment since. He also remembered the night before she vanished. They had argued. She had found a ledger, a physical copy of offshore accounts that proved the Rossi family was paying off a federal judge. She had been terrified of the depth of his criminality, begging him to walk away. The next day her car exploded. He had assumed Carmine ordered the hit to hurt him, but now she was alive. She had faked it. "Boss," Dominic said, softly, stepping out of the shadows with 2 coffees in a cardboard carrier. "You need to sit. You're bleeding." Vincent looked down. His knuckles were raw and split from where he had shattered Joey Galliano's windpipe. He ignored the coffee. "Have you scrubbed the alley?" "Cleaned up. Joey and Frankie are currently locked in the trunk of a Buick in the impound lot. They'll be breathing through tubes for a while." "What do you want done with them?" "Keep them alive. I have questions," Vincent said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. The metal double doors of the trauma bay finally swung open. Dr. Aris stepped out, pulling down his surgical mask. He looked exhausted, but relieved. "She's stabilized," the doctor reported, wiping sweat from his forehead. 3 cracked ribs, severe malnourishment, hypothermia, and multiple contusions. But by some absolute miracle, the placenta is intact. The fetal heartbeat is strong. It's a boy, by the way. Vincent's breath hitched. A boy. His son. Is she awake? She's drifting in and out. The painkillers are heavy. Be gentle, Vincent. She's been living in a state of high cortisol and terror for a long time. Vincent pushed past the doctor, stepping into the dimly lit recovery room. The rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor was the only sound. Ilara lay on the bed, an IV dripping fluids into her bruised arm. She had been cleaned. Her blonde hair was brushed and spread across the pillow, her face devoid of the street grime. She looked so fragile, a stark contrast to the vibrant, confident woman he used to know. He pulled up a metal chair and sat beside the bed, resting his elbows on his knees. He didn't dare touch her, afraid she would shatter. An hour passed in heavy silence. Finally, her eyelashes fluttered. The emerald eyes opened glassy and disoriented at first, before slowly focusing on the sterile ceiling. Then she turned her head. When she saw Vincent, the heart monitor instantly spiked. Beep, 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 beep. She tried to push herself backward, wincing in agony as her cracked ribs protested. Where am I? Let me go, please. Ilara, stop. You're going to pull your IV out, Vincent said, softly, keeping his hands raised in surrender. You're safe. You're in my private clinic. Nobody knows you're here. Tears spilled over her bruised cheeks. You can't keep me here. He'll find me. He'll find out I'm alive, and he'll kill my baby. Carmine, Vincent asked, his anger flaring. Carmine Vitiello is a dead man walking. I will peel the skin from his bones for what his men did to you tonight. Not Carmine, Ilara sobbed, her voice breaking. She clutched the hospital blanket to her chest, shaking her head frantically. Carmine didn't order the car bomb, Vincent. Carmine didn't hunt me down. Vincent frowned, confusion battling the rage in his chest. What are you talking about? Of course it was Carmine. The Vitiellos took credit for it in the underground chatter. Or they took the credit because it made them look strong, Ilara cried out, coughing weakly. She fixed her tear-filled eyes on him, and the absolute devastation in her gaze made Vincent's stomach drop. I ran because I found the ledger, Vincent. But not your ledger. Whose ledger, Ilara? Dominic's. She whispered, her voice trembling with absolute terror. 7 months ago I walked into the study to surprise you. You weren't there. But Dominic was. He was at your safe copying files. I hid behind the door. I saw him talking on a burner phone. To the FBI, Vincent. He's an informant. He's been feeding your shipment routes to the feds to clear a path to take over the family. Vincent sat completely frozen. Dominic, his underboss, the man he had grown up with in the streets of Brooklyn, the man currently standing right outside the door of this very clinic. He saw me, Vincent. Ilara continued, weeping uncontrollably now. Dominic saw me in the reflection of the glass. He knew I heard him. The next day my car exploded. But I had switched cars with my neighbor because mine had a flat tire. My neighbor died, Vincent. I knew Dominic rigged it. I couldn't come to you. He controlled your security, your phones, your schedule. If I stepped foot near you, he would have killed me and the baby. Vincent's mind raced, piecing together the last 7 months. Every failed shipment. Every time the police arrived, just minutes too early. The constant push from Dominic to start a war with the Vitiellos. It all clicked into sickening focus. Dominic had been systematically destroying the Rossi family from the inside, using the Vitiellos as a scapegoat, and he had murdered an innocent woman to silence Ilara. I've been hiding on the streets, living in shelters, sleeping in alleys, trying to stay off the grid so his men wouldn't spot me, she cried, burying her face in her hands. I did it to protect our son. Please, Vincent, don't let him in here. Vincent stood up slowly. The lingering shock in his eyes evaporated, replaced by a terrifying, abyssal darkness. He looked at the closed door of the clinic room. Just on the other side of that wood, the man who had ordered the hit on his family, the man who had condemned the mother of his child to starve in the gutters of the Bronx, was drinking coffee and playing the loyal soldier. Vincent reached into his suit jacket and slowly unsnapped the holster of his custom 1911. You and our son are safe now, Ilara, Vincent said, his voice dead of all emotion, cold and hollow as a grave. I'm going to step outside for exactly 2 minutes. Cover your ears. The heavy oak door clicked shut, sealing Ilara in quiet sanctuary. Out in the fluorescent-lit hallway of the underground clinic, the temperature seemed to instantly plummet. Dominic leaned against the wall, sipping lukewarm coffee. He looked up, searching Vincent's face for the familiar, blinding grief that had kept the Rossi boss pliable and reckless for 7 months. Instead, he found an abyssal, terrifying calm. She going to make it? Boss, Dominic asked, pitching his voice with perfect brotherly concern. Fucking Vitiello animals. I'm telling you, Vincent, this is the final straw. Give the word, and I'll lead a strike team to Carmine's docks tonight. It was a masterpiece of deception. If Ilara hadn't survived the blast, Vincent would have sent his men directly into Dominic's orchestrated FBI trap by midnight. I appreciate your loyalty, Dom, Vincent said softly, his footsteps making no sound as he closed the distance between them. But before we go to war, I need to make a phone call to the Commission. Hand me your phone. Dominic's casual posture stiffened almost imperceptibly. My phone. Your encrypted line is in the SUV. I don't need the encrypted line, Vincent interrupted, his dark eyes locking onto Dominic's. I need the burner phone, the one in your inside jacket pocket, the one you use to text Special Agent Miller. The silence that followed was absolute. Dominic's olive skin turned a sickly, ashen grey. I don't know what you're talking about, Vincent. The stress of tonight is messing with your head. Who the hell is in that room? A ghost, Vincent whispered. Dominic's right hand darted for his waistband, but Vincent was already moving. With ruthless, predatory speed, Vincent slapped Dominic's drawing arm hard against the wall, trapping the weapon. In the same fluid motion, Vincent drew his custom 1911 and drove the heavy steel barrel directly under his underboss's jaw. She saw you, Dominic. Vincent hissed, the veneer of calm shattering to reveal the monstrous rage beneath. 7 months ago, in the study. She heard the call. She knew you rigged her car. Tears of desperate panic welled in Dominic's eyes. The facade completely crumbled. Vincent, please. The feds had me dead to rights on a RICO charge. I was going to get 3 life sentences. I was going to push Carmine into their lap, not you. I swear to God, I didn't know about the baby. You put a bomb in the car of the woman I loved. Vincent roared, his voice a vibrating thunder. You left my unborn son to die in the gutter. Vincent, we're brothers. You stopped being my brother the second you lit that fuse. Vincent pulled the trigger. The roar of the gunshot was deafening. Dominic went limp, instantly sliding down the white tiles and leaving a stark streak of crimson in his wake. The burner phone slipped from his jacket, clattering onto the bloody linoleum. The double doors burst open. Doctor. Aris rushed out, a scalpel in hand, eyes wide with sheer terror as he took in the executed underboss. Get a body bag, Thomas! Vincent ordered calmly, engaging the safety of his weapon. He scooped up the bloody burner phone and pulled out his own cell, dialing Logan, the former military operator who commanded his ghost unit of tactical cleaners. Logan, Vincent said coldly when the line connected. Dominic was an FBI informant. He's dead. Activate the crew and sweep my empire. Anyone loyal to him is to be purged before the sun comes up. Burn the rot to the ground. Understood, boss, Logan's gravelly voice replied. Where will you be? Vincent turned back to look at the closed door of the recovery room. I'll be sitting right here, protecting the Queen. 4 months later. The sprawling fortress-like estate of the Rossi family in the Hamptons was bathed in the golden light of the afternoon sun. High stone walls, electrified fencing, and a private security detail comprised of Logan's elite tactical operators ensured that the grounds were the safest place on the eastern seaboard. Inside the grand parlor, the atmosphere was thick with tension and the smell of imported cigars. The heads of the 5 families were gathered around a massive mahogany table. At the far end sat Carmine Vitiello, looking significantly older and deeply stressed. The landscape of the underworld had shifted violently in the past 4 months. The Night of the Long Knives, as the streets now called it, had seen 22 of Dominic's loyalists and FBI handlers vanish without a trace. Vincent Rossi had systematically dismantled his own infrastructure and rebuilt it into an impenetrable fortress of loyalty and military precision. Carmine, realizing that Dominic had been manipulating both families to spark a war for the feds, had called this sit-down to sue for a fragile peace. Vincent sat at the head of the table, nursing a glass of bourbon. He wore a tailored midnight blue suit, his demeanor relaxed, but exuding a lethal, quiet authority. "We were both played Rossi," Carmine rasped, gesturing with his cigar. "Dominic fed my boys bad intel, made us think you were striking our docks, so we'd retaliate. I admit my men crossed a line in the Bronx that night, but the men responsible, Joey and Frankie, disappeared. We can consider the blood debt settled. Joey and Frankie are currently residing in the foundation of a new